This is TWiT.
So last week, we talked a lot about the interesting blog that Ian Beer at Google's Project Zero made, where he told us about basically what they characterized as non-discriminating waterhole attacks on a small number of servers targeting specific groups. And Leo, you had some information that had just been made public. I guess it was in
TechCrunch had it, but
TechCrunch.
I
Yes,
think Alex Stamos was tweeting about this. He suggested, and I think he's probably right, that Google gave this information on background to TechCrunch because Apple confirmed it.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. And in fact, we have some interesting code actually in the show notes that resulted from some additional research. I think it was Risk IQ that was able to provide additional detail. So anyway, so what we know is that last week Google published their blog about vulnerabilities that Apple fixed. I'm sorry. What Apple posted at the end of last week in their newsroom posting was, they said, I just got a big bright screen on my face. Windows 10 is back up.
Or just rebooting.
Yeah. No, it did that about 5 times, and then it gave me like, we're updating and stuff. Okay, so I'll turn that big bright screen off. Anyway, so Google said last week, Apple posted the following. Last week, Google published a blog about vulnerabilities that Apple fixed for iOS users in February. They said, we've heard from customers who were concerned by some of the claims, and we want to make sure all of our customers have the facts. Apple wrote, first, the sophisticated attack was narrowly focused, not a broad-based exploit of iPhones en masse as described. So Apple was pushing back about some of what Google was saying. They wrote, the attack affected fewer than a dozen websites and we'd heard 11, that focus on content related to, and I can't pronounce this, what's the name of the Muslim community? It's Uighur.
The Uyghurs.
The Uyghurs.
Uyghurs, yeah.
Uyghurs community. They said, regardless of the scale of the attack, we take the safety and security of all users extremely seriously. They wrote, Google's post, issued 6 months after iOS patches were released, creates the false impression of mass exploitation to, quote, monitor the private activities of entire populations in real time, unquote, stoking fear among iPhone users that their devices had been compromised. This was never the case, wrote Apple. They said, second, all evidence indicates that these website attacks were only operational for a brief period, roughly 2 months, not 2 years, as Google implies. They wrote, we fixed the vulnerabilities in question in February, working extremely quickly, which, of course, you and I, Leo, made a point of noting last week, to resolve the issue just 10 days after we learned about it. When Google approached us, we were already in the process of fixing the exploited bugs, which we didn't know of, if that's the case. They said security, this is Apple, is a never-ending journey, and our customers can be confident we are working for them. iOS security is unmatched because we take end-to-end responsibility for the security of our hardware and software. Our product security teams around the world are constantly iterating to introduce new protections and patch vulnerabilities as soon as they're found. We will never stop our tireless work to keep our users safe. So that was their blog posting, which a lot of those in the tech community were a little put off by. They weren't really super happy with the tone of what Apple of Apple's response. Last week, the head of threat research for Risk IQ told ZDNet for their reporting on this that the attacks were indeed very targeted and that Google was wrong in its initial assessment. He later shared some thoughts in a public tweet and provided us with some code.
Very targeted in their regard is, well, it could only have affected the 1 billion people who are in China.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So, yeah. Of course, as we know, that was the group. We have reason to believe that it was, and I think you had said this also last week, Leo, that it was China, no doubt the Chinese government that had infected some of these sites, that was looking to pursue some of these groups. The JavaScript, which was posted as part of Risk IQ's research, actually shows them pulling the country of the user through JavaScript, looking for a match of the country equal to China. And if it's a Chinese person located at an IP address based in China, then it injects some additional JavaScript onto the page after all of this, after waiting 60 seconds, which then performs this hack of iOS devices. So, and actually, I learned a little something from looking at this JavaScript code. There's a cool site, ip.nf, which if you just put ip.nf into your browser, it pulls up a description of the API that this site provides. And if you put ip.nf/me.json, JSON, what you get back is a little bit of JSON, JavaScript object notation, where some information about you based on your IP is shown. And when I did it, it was extremely accurate in its location. And what the script does is it offers a little bit more parameterization. It's ip.nf/me.json ? Callback equal JSONs, JSONS, which gives a more detailed result of a sort of a full JSON hierarchy, and then the JavaScript parses that in order to get the country of origin of the user from which the user is connecting out of the JSON. And if in my case it said United States, and no doubt for people in China it comes back saying China. So anyway, that's that story.